I'm Micah Woods. This is another episode of Cart Rides with Micah. I'm here with Bryce Campton, golf course superintendent at Muriwai Golf Club, just north of Auckland, New Zealand.
Thanks for coming out, Micah. It's I wouldn't say we saved the best to last on your long North Island journey, but it's a pretty cool site, and we're glad to have you out here and have a look around.
Well, let's go. I'm excited to see the turf and hear about how this course is managed. Let's go. You ever hear of MLSN?
Yeah, sure. We don't follow it strictly, but when I first came across it, we did a Malic 3 test, and probably the most important one, potassium, was below the level already. So I didn't want to start adding more than we already were, just to reach a threshold, because I was pretty certain we didn't actually have a potassium deficiency. So we sort of run something slightly modified, also using Sturf's precision fertilizer guide, so nitrogen-driven nutrient demand. And we're just trying to use the soil test that we take each year to dial in a site-specific ratio for each of the nutrients. And on this site, potassium's really the only one we're worried about. There's no phosphorus issues, we've got heaps of magnesium, so that's sort of the way we look at things. But it's definitely a valuable tool, because the typical SLAN analysis that comes with the soil testing here is, while it's tailored to the brown top or whatever your turf situation is, while it's tailored from the database of results that Hills Laboratory has, it doesn't really seem like it quite fits for what's necessary. You're for sure going to end up chasing a medium or high or something number, depending on how you look at the results and who's making the recommendations for you.
Do you measure the clipping volume when the greens are mown?
Yeah, it's something we're kind of only more recently getting into, and we do a really basic version of it, just the center box from one of our greens near the end when we've got a bit of time. Same green every time. And so we're really only in the first year and a half of gathering data and starting to see the trends. So I don't use it as a specific tool to make any decisions on how I'm going to manage the greens, but I definitely reference it when I see something that takes my interest, whether it's maybe some anthracnose coming on and I can have a look at the clip volume and think, okay, that's suddenly dropped off below where I thought it would be. So we're just in the process of trying to figure out what kind of an ideal clip volume is that produces good conditions for us day to day.
Rapid fire questions?
I'm in the hot seat.
Yeah.
Far away.
How many rounds? I see some divots on the tees. How many rounds do you do in a year?
60,000?
And shall we walk up here so we can get the view?
Yeah, sure.
60,000 rounds.
Yeah, this is Auckland's go-to during winter. The rest of the course is clay and a mud pit this time of year, and so everyone comes out here.
Wow. This is the 8th hole?
Yes.
The one that the tourists come to take pictures.
That's why you're here, Micah. Everyone stops to ask us to take photos for them on this tee. That was back when New Zealand had tourists. The locals don't appreciate it so much.
How much nitrogen do you put on the greens in 1 year?
Between 130 and 160. It's been as low as 100, but that didn't work very well come winter time.
What about the timing of the nitrogen? When do you apply it?
Well, we go fortnightly just for the foliar feed, and it's based mostly on sulfate of ammonia. And I'm using growth potential curve to estimate what I should put down. So effectively, we've got a few months in summer where growth potential is at its max, and it tails off down into winter when it's down around 35%. And I just base my nitrogen off a maximum rate that I think produces healthy greens during summer without too much growth. And I've got a couple of rates I play with. One that tends to produce good day-to-day conditions, but the pole is a little on edge, and I'm likely to see some anthracnose every now and then, which is what I like to see. And then when things go a little bit pear-shaped, or when there's a lot of wear, or when I need to recover from something, then I'll bump it up to a slightly higher recovery rate before I bring it back down to our normal plain rate.
And what do you see with disease in terms of that type of fertilizer timing?
Well, with the way we used to do it, which is really trying to minimize growth during summer, we'd always be battling a lot of foliar diseases, just dollar spot and anthracnose, and we're putting down at its peak 26 fungicides a year. And so
26.
Yeah, so 26 fungicides a year, chasing mostly foliar diseases, leaf spot, dollar spot, and anthracnose. And since then, it's really not been an issue. Part of that could be environmental, because I don't think a lot of people are seeing dollar spot. But it gives us the density to come into winter when we have a lot of traffic, and still be able to manage that even with low inputs. I'm probably going to get lost and start rambling in amongst this one. This is, so the front 9 greens were done in brown top, and we were running into the issue of these brown top cultivars and isolated patches looking really sick and affecting the quality of the surface. And it was kind of a years-long search to try and find out what was going on. Is it a disease? Send a sample away. Yes, it's red spot or red leaf spot or something like this. Okay, let's put a fungicide program down. Nothing happens. Okay, is there a nutrient issue going on here? Testing would suggest not really. I just mixed up backpack sprays and treated individual spots with each individual nutrient to see if there was any response. And oddly, calcium had a response. pH was super low, so we limed the grains, and the response was excessive, like an insane response to liming. Once you do that a few times, that starts to taper off. The longevity of the response tapers off as well. Can't keep liming the greens forever, so we cut that. What I didn't factor in on seeing calcium have a response, which I've probably only just realized now, was that it was calcium nitrate, and I didn't factor in the extra nitrogen it was getting. Now that I've swapped the way that I schedule and plan out my fertilizer applications using growth potential, I have not seen that issue come back in like a year and a half. So basically since I've been doing it, I think in this climate on this site, the brown top just wasn't getting, these specific cultivars of brown top just weren't getting fed enough. And now that I'm feeding them more than we would have in the past, this problem has gone away.
How many people on the grounds maintenance crew here, Bryce?
There's 6 of us, including me, which is a little bit of a bump up from recent years. Typically we just have 4 of us all up. So it's made a big difference during summer. Keep on top of a little bit of mowing that we normally wouldn't.
And this looks like a links course. Would you call it that?
Well, that's a point of contention amongst many people, but it is built on the sand in the dunes directly behind the beach. So I would think that's a pretty simple definition of what a links course is. A lot of people would argue there's trees on the course. It's not typical links grass. It's dominated by kikuyu. And so it doesn't always play exactly like a links. Probably more so in winter than in summer. But sure, come on, it's sand as deep as you want to dig right by the beach.
Nursery, brown top.
Yeah, brown top nursery. We didn't have any nursery grass anywhere, and we kept stealing stuff from the chipping green, so we just chucked this in a couple years back if we need to fix up anything on the greens.
Looks like you haven't used it very much, but I love to have a nursery. I can't believe how many golf courses don't have a proper nursery.
To be honest, what we've mostly used it for so far is when we have a tournament, we run 2 cups in the greens, and they obviously only want 1, so we just use the use the plugs to fill in the old cup. We haven't had to use it too much other than that. We've got a fescue and brown top mix around the outside. Mostly it's just a spray buffer to keep the kikuyu out, but we've done the odd little bit around the collars where we've had some issues at times as well. But I'm sure at some stage we'll be happy to have it.
Yeah.
I would be happy if it just sits here unused as well. It's not
You ever get down to the beach?
all time.
Now, do you look at grasses that are growing by the beach?
Yeah, there's the old course works its way in and out of the dunes here, and there's a walking track through it. And there's just this amazing common couch that grows through there that's just beat down by traffic. It's not mown, it's not irrigated, it's not fertilized, and it just forms what looks like the most perfect turf to play off. Really tight and smooth and incredibly firm. It's constantly getting little sand top dressings from the dunes blowing over. And one day I really want to find a big enough patch of it to spread it out into a nursery and have a go at getting it on an in-play area somewhere and see how it handles golf traffic and divot recovery and stuff like that.
Any zoysia? I heard there's a wild zoysia in New Zealand.
Oh, zoysia, not so sure about that. There's some seashore paspalum around. I've not heard anyone seen any zoysia out here. There's a seeded zoysia that's been trialed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you could try and find it. It's I don't think any of it works particularly well, so maybe just can feel it.
Yeah, I'm going to ask another question. And the question is, there's old green sites out here, and we're going over to the 14th hole. What's up with the redesign that happened, 30, 40 years ago? Why did that happen?
Yeah, so I mean, they built the old course in amongst the dunes here in the mid-50s, and by the time the 70s and 80s were rolling around, they were already starting to lose greens and tees into the ocean, and they chipped away at moving backwards. But in the late 90s, they made the call to shift the whole course right back behind a red line, you could call it. And yeah, I mean, simply, and I don't know if you picked it up in the camera there, there's just huge coastal erosion here every now and then, and when the right conditions are around, you can just lose tens of meters at a time. We've got a nursery that we were mowing just a few years ago that's now 6 feet deep in black sand, and you might actually just be able to see it now that we come through here. All the tops of the dunes are pretty weak and exposed. We're coming over to the 14th now, and maybe 5-10 meters behind that macrocarpa there's open dune sand making its way in. So this is probably the most at-risk part of the golf course. The rangers have done a great job, especially south of here and right up to the north, of restabilizing the dunes with spinifex planting and reshaping the dunes, because they initially made them too high and they used marram and it's prone to blowouts. So they flatten them out, use spinifex, and it keeps them more stable. But this part of the course hasn't had all the love and attention that those other bits have had yet. There's just been little spots of remediation here and there, but hopefully we can get there before we risk losing my favorite hole on the course. I started here and it was being watered by it just catches the outside of some fairway watering, and it's a real low spot there, and it was being overwatered. So I just cut the irrigation right down to almost nothing, and it died because it coincided with a really droughty hot summer, and naughty me, I didn't do anything about it, I just left it bare. By the end of summer it was filling in with couch, and by the end of the second summer it had become like a pure sward of this really beautiful couch grass. It's obviously pretty wet, there's a lot of power and a bit of kike back through it now, but I just love this stuff, eh? Like, I just really want to like create a little nursery establishment program, see if I can get it on an in-play higher wearing area of the course and see how it holds up, because it's so low maintenance. This requires no water. Yeah, I'd love to see how this goes. This gives you an idea of how quickly the dunes can move on us. There was a walking track that was put in here just 2 years ago that's about 6 feet under right now, and the rangers do a really good job of planting spinifex and pingao to help stabilize them. It all has to be sourced on site, it's all eco-sourced. All their seed is collected from this set of dunes, sent away to a nursery, comes back 2 or 3 years later. So they're really limited in what they can plant, depending on how successful their seed harvest is. It's a combination of extreme wind blow, recent droughts killed a lot of the vegetation that was here, and the huge wintertime roaring 40 storms that we get with big tides that surge up the dunes and wash the sand out as well. It all contributes to a pretty unstable dune system at the moment.
Any rabbits out here that eat the vegetation when you're trying to establish some new plants?
Yeah, it's not even when you're trying to establish new plants that's the big issue, because most of the course is pretty well established. They'll nibble away at lush little surrounds. An interesting one was during the lockdown. We didn't mow the greens for a few weeks, and they'll come in and nibble away at the greens. And yes, in short, there's a lot of rabbits here, and the biggest nuisance is the scrapings. They dig up everything, whether it's the fairways, bunkers, paths. So We work with the rangers and they organise a few shoots a year, which is not easy because it's open to the public. And in terms of other pests, we work with the local environmental conservation group who bait for rats on the front nine. They've got self-resetting traps for rats and stoats on the back nine. We've got possum traps all around the property. Deer are a real nuisance as well, hoof marks over all the greens. So every now and then some of the locals get a feed out of them. Yeah, that's our
No
main
pigs?
pest. No pigs I've ever seen. I'll be surprised if there weren't pigs, but I'm not sure how good they are at getting through small fences. The deer just jump over them. Yeah, so we get one renovation week a year of 3 days, and it was always done fairly traditionally, 5/8 hollow tines at 1/2-inch spacings, with a big dump of sand and maybe fortnightly top dressings. And then we've tried to fill around with that to limit the impact it has on the greens. And recently, after nightmarish coring, we've totally revisited it, and we just use, like our last renovation was little 9.5mm solid tines on a little high-speed unit that we can go over a few times, and that affected 15% of the surface area, but recovered in a week and a half. And this is purely just because we are trying to lower our organic matter at the moment. It is above what we'd like it to be, and this performance characteristics aren't quite what we'd like them to be in terms of firmness. And so on top of that, we also go with, at the moment, weekly, very light top dressings, where with a brush and a roll directly ahead of the golf, it still produces a good putting surface.
How much sand do you put in a year?
I think last year it was 120 tons per hectare.
Okay.
That's a lot, and it's purely because we're trying to reduce organic matter at the moment.
So that'll be about 8mm if we express that in my preferred depth units.
Yeah, it's approximately that, and I think it's somewhere like maybe 0.2 of a millimeter per top dressing.
Okay.
That we go. If we can get to our target and use and hit the ideal growth rates to manage it all, I'd happily not do the heavy renovation and just manage it through top dressing. And I think maybe in the future I could see it being something like, maybe it's a late weekly top dressing during summer, it goes into fortnightly during the fringe seasons, and maybe every 3 or 4 weeks in the cooler time of the year, or maybe it's adjusting the rates through those periods as well. But certainly I prefer it when the greens don't have the sand lingering in the canopy.
Bryce, that was amazing. What an interesting golf course this is.
Yeah, thanks for coming out, Micah. It's been great having you out to have a look around. Hope you've picked up a few interesting things to mull over, and enjoyed your stay here.
I have. I've seen some really interesting grasses, and I enjoyed this morning so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah.